welcome to the Lions Den.
The one and only Leo.
Where we for our man. Welcome to the Lions Den. Welcome to the Lions Den. Welcome to the Lions Den, where we pray for our fellow man. Come on, man, get your knowledge. To the Lions Den. Get your facts straight. To the Lions Den. And most importantly, to the Lions Den. For our man.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Lion's Den. I am your host, Leo, and I just want to say thank you for joining me. Last week, I covered and I stopped. I put a pause. For those of you who've been following, I've put a pause on the teaching of the Psalms to cover the topical discussion because I kind of felt like pushing these two things together. If I had done the Psalm and then this topical discussion, I would be more than an hour, which it's kind of been true because the topical discussions have been going close to 30 minutes, and I have actually one that went almost to 40. So that's really pushing it. I don't really want, again, I like being supplemental to people, to be supplemental in the addition of teaching. I don't want to replace a lot. And then also, I don't want to hit you guys with a fire hose either and be like, information. You know, I can't do that. That wouldn't be fair to you guys. And then I know some of you are following me here on YouTube. Have no fear. Actually, down below, you'll see there's a link that actually says that if you want to listen to me on audio, you can get me on Spotify. So just click on that link and it'll take you to the episode page, and then you can follow, and then you can listen to you'll get notified on Spotify, and you can listen to this on audio, and you don't necessarily have to sit here and you know, gaze upon my beautiful face and go blind at the same time. I do want to say thank you to everybody who has been sending me a lot of encouraging messages, especially regarding this subject of godliness. I've actually gotten quite a bit of good comments from it. It's something that a lot of people have actually said the words like, I never really thought of it that way. I never really perceived as a man to that I have to, I'm responsible for my family, and that gives me a charge in leadership. But at the same time, it should scare the snot out of me because I'm really responsible for them in the sight of God, and I'm inside, and that's also with my relationship with other men as well, to be at peace but not losing my ground at the same time. Finding that can only really be found when you stand on the solid rock that is Jesus. And it's very difficult to do. No one said it was easy. As a matter of fact, Jesus had no problem saying how hard it was. He says, narrow is the way. And so we have to, and that narrowness basically means that I'll put it to you like this. We need the effectual calling of the Holy Spirit just to experience salvation. To experience sanctification, we need the continual work of the Holy Spirit. We need the continual work of God in how it is that we become saved and how we continue to be saved. And then we will still need the Holy Spirit when we reach the day of glory, and that will be a beautiful day. But until then, we are the workmanship of God himself, the Holy Spirit working through his church. And as men, we've been tackling that. And I kind of made a promise, and I'm delving into what is now controversial territory. And why? And why has it become controversial territory when this was really commonplace knowledge? Is because a lot of people think that I'm going to take what's known as a misogynistic or a chauvinistic approach to roles, to gender roles. And unfortunately, we don't realize that it's not necessarily an act to crush, but instead it is an act in which we have to understand that we've put women actually in a very compromised state, when we've done some of the things in which a lot of the times that women have become the spiritual heads of the house. That's a very dangerous position to actually be in, because you as the man need to for men need to be the spiritual heads of their home. They need to be the ones that pray harder than the women. They need to be the ones more in the Bible than the women folk, however you want to say it. You're called to be the spiritual head. You're supposed to be bringing spiritual instruction. It's not supposed to be your wife. And unfortunately, a lot of people are like, well, what's wrong with women taking charge in the spiritual life? Well, it makes the church effeminate. It doesn't make the church, the church doesn't snap together. The church is then one way. Like, I would say that if men were to be the only, which is what the church in Rome did for a very long time, and it still does today, where it's only men that run it, and they take no input at all from the vestiges of the woman in the role. And what happens? It's very heavy-handed. It's hyper masculine. I'm not going to say toxic masculinity. I won't give it that title, because that's just something it's hyper masculine or ultra alpha or whatever you want to say, where it is you have, when the women are the spiritual heads of the you're making the faith effeminate. And here, when you have the men only in charge and they've completely discounted the role of women as a whole, then what you actually end up doing is you make the church heavy-handed and almost unprincipled and barbaric in a way. Because that's why I said, for women are far more compassionate. Men are far more competitive. But when men are the spiritual heads of the home, hold on, they cannot discount the spiritual role of women in the home. You see, if a man is actually a spiritual head of his home, he will have to count on the spiritual role that his wife provides. Men should pray harder and study their word more. But women, I'll say it like this, should almost be driven by that level of like it should be a motivating factor. That it shouldn't be like, oh well, he does the spiritual stuff, let him just do all the Jesus things, and then I'll just be on about my. No, it should instead motivate her to follow after that man, but at the same time understand that it's not following after that man, but following after the God in which his life should be pointed. That's why I said the role of a man should really reflect godliness, so that he's pointing his family in the direction of the God that he's following. So she's not following him, she's following God and the instrument that God is using, which is the husband. And what she's supposed to do is, here it is, women do a more support role. And I hate when I say that, because everybody loses their minds on this. And I kind of remember the Joker from The Dark Knight. Everybody loses their minds. And listen, here's the reality, okay? Take it from somebody who's been support. I've worked backstage in major productions. I've done from lights and spotlights, from spotlights to sound to light boards, from setting up speakers to running whole soundboards on technical direction. I've done a whole lot of that, and I've done just a little bit of time on stage. I've done more as a support person, being that in the military, being that within my life. And I could tell you, support is very important, not because I'm trying to make myself feel good, but because the people that are in charge, the people that they cannot do anything without adequate support. Not with people who say, I'm supporting you, and so therefore you got to give me what's mine. Not egotistical support. That's not going to adequate support. And that's the role of women, because when and I love the whole idea that Eve was taken from the side of Adam, because from the side, when Adam is tired, he has somebody that can that provides that support. As he provides protection, she provides support. A man can't provide protection and support. That's what's wrong with the whole idea of the alpha man mentality that is going on today with this manosphere stuff. And that's why I'm seeing all these videos of these guys saying, we have no one, we're isolated, people unconditionally love a dog, but I have to, people will they love me conditionally because I give them all this love and support and I do all these things. And it's like, because you're not supposed to be doing any of that. Let's face the facts. You're not supposed to be doing that. You're not a support character within your family. You're taking a leadership role, and you depend on the people that are your family to be your support, to do what they need to do, for the children to do their chores, and for the wife to provide whatever level of support she can so that you can lead properly. If not, you're not going to be leading. You're going to be falling behind. And then your family ends up falling behind. You end up taking on more than you should as a man. Because why? Because believe it or not, the one who actually has a more, I'll say it like this, physiologically, women are a lot more flexible. Physically, they are. Emotionally, they are. Spiritually, they are as well. So when a woman is approaching godliness, she's approaching it from a support. But believe it or not, the support is the strongest person in the actual face of it, in reality. And I'm not saying that to say it, because the leadership stands on the support. If the support falls, the leadership falls. When the leadership falls, the whole thing is gone. There's nothing left to take from it. So that's why men being in the home is so important, and why single parent. Golly, I'm losing my mind. Single parent families. I'm like, that's why single parent families fail, because the leadership is missing. You bring the leadership back, and then an adequate support. Now you say, well, I'm not going to be holding him up. I don't do that. Listen. You're not holding him up for him, not for his sake, but for the sake of the Father. Women in the approach should have a more humble approach to godliness than men, because it's within the realm of your character. It gives to the compassion. Now, when your husband is tired and he feels exhausted, you can provide the adequate support. You're not telling him, you need to get up and get moving, and you're so tired, you don't do anything. Well, that's not support. I'm not even going to say that's nagging, because nagging is actually a lot more supportive than that. But that's what's happening a lot. Why? Because the men have spoiled their families, I'll tell you this, in manosphere culture, men spoil their families rotten. Absolutely rotten. Because they make themselves something, they throw all the gifts out there, and then when it's all said and done, they fall apart because there's no support. Rather than raising their families and saying, here's how we're all going to help each other out as we all follow after God, you say in the manosphere culture, in this ultra man stuff, I am all that is man, and you shall follow me, and I shall be your God, and you shall be my people. And that is wrong. That's why that whole concept is wrong. It's the same thing as if a man was to be a dog when he's single and he's going around and he's having different mates trying to choose what is that? That's somebody who has no support. That is somebody that is insecure, and that at the end will never really feel like they can get what it is that they're always going to feel like what they have is never enough. And then when they have something, they gotta lock it down as fast as they can, because they know how quickly it can slip away. Because of how callous and how callous they were to something so frail and fragile in a relationship. That's the issues. These are the problems we are faced with today. And ladies, it may start with the men, but it ends with you. Because you are the backbone of the relationship. He may be the head, but women aren't the neck. You're the backbone. You're the overall overarching support of the family. You are what connects everything. You connect the head to the community. And I'm going to show you that throughout this entire week in Godliness, how your relationships, when your relationships are because you are chasing after God, when you establish godly relationships with your children, with your husband, with your coworkers, and your friends, you will see that in reality, you're going to realize you're the strongest member of your family. But you're also the most caring and compassionate. See, women are the spine. But what's the most important thing that's connected to the spine? Everybody says, well, it's the head, right? Wrong. That's the second. That's the second, and it comes really, 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 really close to the first. It's the rib cage. The rib cage is attached to is what really protects a majority of your vital organs. And that is why the strength of spine is so important. When you start having back issues, and I can attest to this, and you guys can look it up medically. When you start having back issues, believe it or not, you're unbalanced, and your internal organs are actually in a lot of pain. Your body is off kilter. Without proper support, it doesn't matter how strong the mind is. It doesn't matter how strong the head is. If the spine is lacking, the whole thing crumbles. That's the reality. Ladies, it's not to demean you, but it's as if we don't understand as people the curse of Eve, that she was to want to be the head of the house. There is no evidence to me that is more that displays something so beautiful in the confines of who Jesus was and how he ministered to women, young and old, that how much he loved them. And yet you can see hyper masculine societies pushing women away, casting them aside as nothing. And yet, Jesus compassionately understood that they needed him. And he was going to make himself available to them. Here goes a story that comes really, really close to my heart. And believe it or not, it's actually a story within the that is found in the Gospel of Mark. In the Gospel of Luke and in the Gospel of Matthew, they're two separate stories. They happen separately. But in the book of Mark, they are in the book of Mark they were brought together. Now here's why I think why that happened. The account of Luke is the account of the Gospels in which he's getting everybody's feedback, and he spent a lot of time with John, and Luke really didn't spend a whole lot of time with Peter. In Matthew, it's Levi's account. Matthew, we know him as Matthew. He was Levi. Levi was not part of everything that happened. And we'll read actually about that. We'll read about that. But Mark spent a lot of time with Peter. John Mark, to me, is the most, in my opinion, is the most valued writer of the gospel. And often Mark is the most overlooked gospel. But let me give you a really quick overview of the Gospel of John Mark by giving you a little bit of backstory to it. John Mark was somebody, he was the cousin of Barnabas, and he had given his life to Christ, and he wanted to follow Barnabas in the mission field. And so Barnabas brought him along, and Barnabas' ministry is, of course, the ministry of the Apostle Paul. And as they're traveling, and they get stuck in it. They get in a town, and John Mark starts falling in line with a lot of people who, some people say he fell in line with Judaizers, or he started going into, he started hanging out with the Nicolaitans. In other words, he was walking away from the gospel according to Jesus. He was he was walking away from the gospel. He got caught up during the ministry. While they're in ministry, John Mark got carried away into something else. And it took a lot of work to bring him out of that. And Paul kind of saw what it did to Barnabas, and he didn't want to go through it again. So when the second missionary journey comes, Paul kind of remembers that, and he talks to Barnabas. And I'm sorry, the third missionary journey comes along. This was between the second and the third missionary journey. So in the third missionary journey, Barnabas comes to Paul. They have an argument because Barnabas wants to bring John Mark. Now, John Mark has grown, but Paul doesn't want to deal with that hassle again. So Paul's like, Barnabas, I love you, bro, but he can't come. And I'm putting my foot down, and if you want him to come, then you can't come either. Sorry, that's just the way I am. And it led to a really massive falling out between them. But Barnabas says, all right, well, if I can't go, well, then I'm gonna take John Mark, and he's gonna hang out with Peter. John Mark ended up going to Jerusalem and hanging out with Peter for a very, very long time. And I believe that was the Holy Spirit working, because without that falling out between Barnabas and Paul, without that whole issue between them happening, we wouldn't have gotten the Gospel of Mark. Now you say, well, that's a pretty big what if. Let me tell you something. It's a what if that would never have happened because the Gospel of Mark was going to be written. So that fight was going to happen no matter what. And praise the Lord that it did, because we have Mark's account, which is really Peter's account, and it's not the Gospel of Peter. The Gospel part, Mark, is not the Gospel of Peter. The other apostles had a say as well when they talked to Mark. Mark just didn't spend a lot of time with just Peter and Peter alone. He actually spent a lot of time with John, and he spent a lot of time with James of Alphaeus. He spent time with the other, with Jude. You know, he spent time with these guys. You know, but he did spend an awful lot of time with Peter, and it kind of shows in the gospel according to John Mark. So I know I'm running a little low on time, but I'm actually gonna go about as long as I can on this. Here I go, starting at Matthew chapter 5 and verse 21. Now, when Jesus had crossed over again by boat to the other side, a great multitude gathered to him, and he was by the sea. And behold, one of the rulers of the synagogue came, Jairus by name. And when he saw him, he fell at his feet and begged him earnestly, saying, My little daughter lies at the point of death. Come lay your hands on her, that she may be healed, and she will live. So Jesus went with him, and a great multitude followed him and thronged him. Now a certain woman had a flow of blood for 12 years, and had suffered many things from many physicians. She had spent all she had and was no better, but rather grew worse. When she heard about Jesus, she came behind him in the crowd and touched his garment. For she said, If only I may touch his clothes, I shall be made well. Immediately the fountain of her blood was dried up, and she felt in her body that she was healed of the affliction. And Jesus, immediately knowing in himself that power had gone out of him, turned around in the crowd and said, Who touched my clothes? But his disciples said to him, You see the multitude thronging you, and you say, Who touched me? And he looked around to see her who had done this thing. But the woman, fearing and trembling, knowing what had happened to her, came and fell down before him and told him the whole truth. And he said to her, Daughter, your faith has made you well. Go in peace and be healed of your affliction. And while he was still speaking, some came from the ruler of the synagogue's house, who said, Your daughter is dead. Why trouble the teacher any further? As soon as Jesus heard the words that was spoken, he said to the ruler of the synagogue, Do not be afraid, only believe. And he permitted no one to follow him except Peter, James, and John, the brother of James. Then he came to the house of the ruler of the synagogue and saw a tumult. I don't know. You figure that one out. And those who wept and wailed loudly. When he came in, he said to them, Why make this commotion and weep? The child is not dead, but sleeping. And they ridiculed him. But when he had put them all outside, he took the father and the mother of the child, and those who were with him, and entered where the child was lying. Then he took the child by the hand and said to her, Talitha cumi, which is translated, Little girl, I say to you, arise. Immediately the girl arose and walked, for she was 12 years of age. And they were overcome with great amazement. But he commanded them strictly that no one should know it, and said that something should be given her to eat. Now, some people have used this to basically say that Jesus was still hiding in his ministry, but the fact is that he did raise this little girl from the dead. And we will learn later on when when Jesus raises Lazarus from the dead, the Pharisees and the Sadducees, the other rulers of the temple, of the synagogue, they would actually put orders out to kill Lazarus. So it wasn't that he was trying to hide his ministry; it was more he was knowledgeable that any evidence of any kind of work like this that he would do would mark this girl for execution. So he wanted to make sure that no one was going to harm the girl. That's a very important thing. With the very little time that I have, I will discuss a couple of things. The menorrhagia is what the woman with the uncontrollable flow suffered from. It's literally the hemorrhaging of the wall of the uterus. In Hebrew law, this woman could not live amongst those people. She had to live outside. She actually couldn't live within the leper colony either because she wasn't leprous. So she couldn't live in community. She was outside of the community. There's a chance that when she touched the hem of Jesus' garment, she was crawling on her hands and knees, which I'm pretty sure is what she did. With that being said, it is also with that knowledge that we know, it is also with some knowledge that we do know this, that Jesus felt the power move from him. Why is this so important that these two encounters were put together? Whereas, people are like, well, maybe Jesus needed a recharge. No, that's not how this works. Why is Matthew only put the account at Jairus' house, and then Luke solely puts the woman with the uncontrollable flow? I really don't know, but it is important that John Mark, when he puts them together, this entire thing happening, when he says, "Who touched me?" they base the disciples are like, everyone's touching you. And when he turns around and he sees her, and she tells him his story, she tells him her story. Man, I'm losing it today. She tells him her story, and he says, "Be healed." Now the little girl is dead, and everybody was like, now it's too late. almost as if to try and rob this situation of this woman, that she is now healed. Her life, her entire life, when it says that she was basically ravaged by physicians, you would have to put that this woman was in a very suffering state. In a sense, no man would marry her. She was basically on her own. And now Jesus is on his way to heal a sick little girl. And this woman does this. She knows that if she just touches him, this should teach all the women about the position that we as Christians, as the church, we as the church should hold, and as women in their family should hold. Ladies, reach for Jesus. We have an uncontrollable flow of sin ravaging us every single day. And as the church, we should do what this woman does and reach for Jesus. Ladies, do this for your family. Reach for Jesus. For your children and for your husbands. That sin no longer ravages your homes. Men are to provide some instruction. When men are supposed to provide the instruction, they're supposed to be the real prayer warriors of the family. But ladies, you are the shield maidens of the home. You need to be reaching for Jesus. Don't reach for your husband. Reach for Jesus. He's the head of your home, but he's not the head of your life. It's Jesus. Reach for Jesus. Approach in godliness, in a position of humility, and pray hard for your families. Be that support, knowing that if you touch the hem of his garment, that the uncontrollable flow of sin may cease. That your husband is guided by the hand of God and not by his own ego. And that your children follow his instruction, but provide you with the necessary support that you can provide. You see, if you've got the children doing their chores and you've got them doing the things that they're supposed to be doing, they're providing proper support for the husband. There you are, protecting the vital organs of the family, because that's what children are. That's why we have this need to protect our children. They are the vital organs because they are the future, not just of your family, because your family will have a legacy. And it's a legacy rooted deep in godliness. If you value those vital organs, you will protect them and you will reach for Jesus, ladies. Stop trying to take on your husband's role and start taking on yours. And men, encourage your wives to do it. And provide the example while you're at it. You see, I can berate, and that's why there's such controversy around the women. Listen, ladies, I'll tell you, you got to humble yourself. But men, you got to provide the example in that humbling. As the leader, lead by example. This is the safeguard of the family. Not everybody just doing whatever they want to do all willy-nilly. That does not happen. Say, Leo, you get that all from this story? Yes, because look at what sin, look at what this woman's condition does to her. Imagine this is what sin does to us in our isolation. And now we need to stop the uncontrollable flow of sin. We need to reach for the hem of his garment. It's plain and simple. But I love what Jesus calls her. Daughter. Daughter. He didn't say woman be healed, which is a term of endearment. But this is a term of endearment and intimacy. Ladies, have an intimate relationship with Jesus that should rival the relationship that your husband has with Jesus. In other words, together, y'all got to have a good relationship with Jesus and not be in competition. But ladies, be compassionate, and men, be protective of the gospel, that no other gospel should enter in. And ladies, that gospel that you believe blossoms out in the fruit that will be your children. That's how this works. And then here's the beauty that Jesus goes and raises this little girl from her sleep, from her death. He raises her up. And then he tells everybody, just take care of her. Give her something to eat. Don't tell anybody. Why? Because he's safeguarding her. Jesus is protecting that child from the predations of evil men who will do anything to discount and destroy his ministry. That they would kill that little girl. They would do it. And Jesus says, no one needs to know. Not right now. That's why he's doing it. He's not doing it. Everybody, Jesus is like, shh, don't tell anybody about my ministry. No. Don't tell anybody that I'm God. No, that's not what he's doing. Believe me, he's been telling people that he's God. And that's already got them all riled up. But now he raises somebody up from the dead, and a little girl at that, who everybody had been saying out loud, oh, she's dead, she's dead. There was a whole funeral procession that Jesus was walking into while she was laying on that bed already. And Jesus, being aware that the world was going out to prey on that little girl, as soon as they found out that she was alive, told everybody, shh, guard your little girl and provide for her. That's it. Ain't nobody else got to know. No one has to know what happened here. At least not right now. Wow, should we guard our children in such a way? Should we realize that if we provide the instruction of the Lord to our children, now men, I'm talking to you too, if we provide the instruction to our children, we give them the comfort and the compassion and the grace that they need to grow. We provide the discipleship and the discipline required for them to be made resistant to the ways of the world. And we keep the world from preying on them. We make them aware of it. But I love it because people are like, oh, they'll find out when they get there. What are you talking about? How about you tell them what the world is like? Tell them what they're walking into and make it real for them so that when they know what it is you're actually preparing them for, so they're not foolish when it comes to the ways of the world. They're not naive or gullible. That they don't walk into some way where some guy comes and tells them, oh, well, if we all just love one another, man, all of a sudden they're like, oh, yeah, you know what? You're right, bro. And they start following this acolyte of destruction. rather than giving them something strong to be nurtured in. We shield them, but we even shield them from themselves. Like we build a wall around our children. Listen, the internal organs are wrapped by the rib cage, but guess what they rest on? The spine. There's access. And a lot of times what we do is we shield our children and we just throw them in a room and say, well, as long as I can keep them safe and keep them locked away. Listen, you're even locking them away from yourself. You're making it a whole lot worse than you think. Provide for your children. Provide them with instruction, comfort, compassion, grace, discipleship, and discipline. Make them aware, but don't throw them to the wolves either. But you can't lock them in a chest. Your children will grow to be their own individuals. Teach them that they are an individual in the family of God, so that they too can be called sons and daughters. That's just the beginning. I've got so much more to do, so much more to give, don't I? But then again, like I said, I'm very even-handed. But I will be getting the more controversial subjects as the week does progress. So keep on listening. And again, if you can't watch it on video, you can always listen on audio. Go ahead, subscribe below. Click on the link, subscribe to Spotify. You can go ahead. There's also another Spotify underneath, which is Grow Closer to God. That's Jesse Velez, and he actually uses AI, which is actually really interesting. But it's great instruction. It's great teaching. And unlike me, he tries to keep it under 10 minutes, which is pretty awesome if you ask me. So you can go ahead, do that. And also there's other links there you can click on. Go ahead, peruse through christianbook.com. It's right down there in the description. You have the catalog. Access to the catalog. christianbook.com is great for resources, devotionals, Bibles, and to me they carry the best price. They're 10 times better than Amazon. And then also there's also a link to StreamYard. If you actually want to start your own podcast, go ahead, click on StreamYard, give it a try, and then sign up for that $25 a month that it is. You'll actually on your first month get a $10 credit. And that just starts with clicking on those links below. And you might get something, gain something, and most importantly, it's what we want to do for you here at the Lodge, starting here with the Lion's Den, but we've got more shows to come. So please subscribe at The Official Lodge on YouTube, and hopefully we've got some more stuff coming your way. Thank you guys very much. Have a great rest of your day, and may God bless you and keep you in the hollow of his hand.